What's up, basketball fans? Welcome to True North Sports Talk podcast. I am your host, Peter Barclay, and as per usual, when we get to recording our podcast, if there is a game on, Blue Jays to my left, and we actually aren't focusing on baseball today. We are taking a look at the sport, as we mentioned, of basketball. And we are talking college basketball. That's right. It is the end of March, and March Madness is taking place as we speak. So, Elite Eight and everything else in between. So, buckle up the next half hour to an hour. We're just going to carry on talking about what's happening in the madness. We're going to get you caught up to where we are now in the madness. And we are down to 4 games. 4 teams standing between us and the final 4. So, the matchups today are pretty incredible. Again, this is being recorded a little bit before we post it. So you may recognize some games that you already know the score to. Starting at 2:15 today as we record this, Tennessee took on number 1 Michigan. Then at 5 o'clock, we had Duke versus UConn. And that might be the biggest, most hard-fought game of this entire tournament. Those are the Elite 8 games for today. The winners advance to the Final 4. That takes place on Saturday, April 4th. That will take place at Lucas Oil Stadium in Indianapolis. But yesterday we got 2 more of the Elite 8 games that set the stage, with number 3 Illinois beating number 9 Iowa 71-59, and Arizona dominated Purdue 79-64, and we already have 2 of the teams in the Final 4. So you have, Illinois and Arizona in the Final 4, and we will see who the other 2 teams will be. So today we are going to take a look at everything that you can imagine. We're going to recap how we got there. We're going to talk about Sweet 16 chaos, some Cinderella stories, some upsets. We're going to preview today's games. We'll talk about our dark horse team that we think nobody saw coming. And we will look ahead to Final 4. We're going to try and keep this as detailed as possible, so buckle up. And let's dive into the madness. So, Sweet 16 recap. Let's start by recapping the Sweet 16 because the theme was crystal clear that size matters in college basketball. The second wave of Thursday's Sweet 16 action reinforced just how much size dominates in this sport. Number 1 Arizona and number 3 Illinois are 2 of the biggest, most physical teams in the country, and they cruised behind their larger lineups. Arizona 109-88 over Arkansas in this game, so we got 21 point victory there. Arizona, which ranks number 7 in KenPom's average metric, used their physical advantage to earn a never-ending series of quality looks. They scored 109 points against what is and has been all year a very strong and very solid Arkansas defense. They didn't get there by accident. Arkansas star freshman Darius Acuff Jr., he's a projected top 10 pick this year in the draft coming up in July, I want to say. Led all scorers with 28 points, but they just couldn't match Arizona's balanced attack. 6 Wildcats, so that's all starters and at least one guy off the bench, maybe a couple guys off the bench, scored at least 14 points. That's the kind of depth NBA teams dream about. Acuff likely played his final college game, as he is likely to declare for the draft. He became the first player in the SEC to average 22 points and 6 rebounds, since some guy named Pistol Pete Maravich. Maybe you heard of him, maybe you haven't. Depends on how much of a historian you are of this game. That name jumps out at me for sure. That is some legendary company. It just couldn't do the trick because of Arizona's physicality. How much of that also is the referees allowing them to decide the game on the court instead of by the whistle. Illinois, they were 65-55, so 10-point victors over Houston. They ranked number 1 in average height, and they got pushed a little bit more by the second seed Houston, but Illinois was able to turn that height into a fairly dominant defensive game, earning their second Elite 8 trip in 3 seasons. Houston, they were able to force into a 34.4% from the floor, and that's a pretty low number considering you want to live between, say, 50 and 70% is what you're hoping for. They didn't really attempt a free throw until the 3:27 mark of the second half. That screams officiating to me because, I mean, I've played in games where I look up at the scoreboard, I know how many times I've been fouled, and it still says 0 under the other team. So to me, that is a huge knock on the NCAA, really, and the officials they chose for that game. Now, again, they maybe weren't forcing the issue the way they should have right from the beginning, and that's why that number looked the way it did. But to me, that's a very, very strong indicator that officiating was leaning in a certain direction. They registered 0 fast break points, which tells me their defense needed to pick things up quite a bit more than it did. That's a scary statistic for any team. I don't care what level of basketball you play. 0 fast break points is just simply not acceptable. The Cougars splashed home 5 3-pointers in the second half, but they didn't have the time or the firepower to overcome an 18-point deficit. This game was played at Toyota Center in Houston, just 3 miles from Houston's campus. So it was basically a home game, which is a little bit surprising at the officiating as well. But they still lost because the length, the height, the strength of Illinois pretty much made life miserable for the Houston Cougars. Purdue 79-71 in it's an 8-point victory, but that's a bit more of a thriller. And depending on how the game went back and forth, I mean, this basically was one of the best games of the Sweet 16. Purdue edged Texas. I guess 8 points these days. The way the game is played isn't edging. Purdue, the number 2 seed, survived a scare from the 11 seed. And the first 4 team that shocked the world by making the Sweet 16. Texas's Cinderella run ended, but they proved that they belonged on that stage. Iowa 72, Nebraska 65. And that was the final game of the Sweet 16 on Thursday. Number 9 seed Iowa topped the number 4 seed Nebraska. Iowa a double-digit lead and is now in the Elite 8 and was just 2 wins from the Final Four. Friday's Sweet 16 was equally dramatic. You had Duke and St. John's, so those are some East Coast teams. And Duke, this is more of a survival thriller than the last one, but Duke 80, St. John's 75. Duke was the number 1 overall seed, and clearly this was a heated battle with the number 5 seed in St. John's. The game ended with some chippy back and forth play. In the end, at the end of the day, the powerhouse in Duke moved on. Duke is led by freshman star Cameron Boozer. He is looking like the National Player of the Year. He's projected a top 3 pick in the July draft. As I suspected, Boozer is the son of former NBA player, a guy Utah fans will know very, very well. And Carlos Boozer, he has been dominant all season long, which has really helped that Duke team get to where they are. Now, Michigan took on Alabama, a number 1 against a number 4, and this was a bit more of a low-stress game. 90-77 was the final. Michigan has looked phenomenal throughout this tournament, and they're big, they're talented, and they're playing at an elite level. Now, based on what we know of the Elite 8 that we started out with, they did get punched out at some point. UConn took on Michigan State, 67-63. UConn, the number 2 seed. They are also the defending national championship, and they survived a huge scare, because that's only about a 5-point difference, so that's 2 possessions, really. A couple of 3-pointers go the other way, and that result is different. So, MSU cut a 19-point deficit, which you might suspect would have happened, down to 1 before UConn scored 5 straight to seal it. UConn's trying to become the first team to win back-to-back titles since some team in Florida that featured Joakim Noah and Al Horford. Forgive me. Took me a second to pull his name out. So that's some pretty good company if they are able to pull it off. Tennessee 76, Iowa State 62. So that was a much more comfortable margin for Tennessee. They are the number 6 seed, and they are still playing as it is today. And they dominated the number 2 seed in Iowa State. Iowa was playing without their star forward Joshua Jefferson, and Tennessee's size and physicality just ended up being too much. Tennessee head coach Rick Barnes is back in the Elite 8 for the 3rd consecutive season, and this time he's got a real shot, it would seem, at the Final Four. So, yesterday's Elite 8, we had Illinois and Arizona advance. So, we got 2 Elite 8 games. Both were dominant. Illinois 71-59. That's a pretty big margin of victory. And they punched their ticket to the Final Four. Illinois' length and defense were just too much for the Hawkeyes. Iowa was a bit of a Cinderella story at the 9 seed, but their magic just seemed to run out as they ran up against that number 3 Illinois. They were able to upset number 8 Clemson, number 4 Nebraska to reach the Sweet 16, and then they shocked number 2 Houston to reach where they did. Illinois just simply was a bad matchup for them. Illinois is heading to the Final Four for the first time since 2005. That's a 21-year drought. Coach Brad Underwood has built something pretty special in Champaign. Arizona 79, Purdue 64 in the nightcap. The number 1 seed just took it to the number 2 Purdue. This game really didn't feel close. It was just from the get-go a bit of a woodshed beating. Arizona's heading to the Final Four for the first time in 25 years, since 2001, and Coach Tommy Lloyd has the Wildcats playing what appears to be, at this point, they are peaking at the right time with the best basketball in the country. As we mentioned before, they have a very balanced attack, remembering 6 players had 14 plus points. So that is lethal on the offensive end. They're not reliant on one star. They have depth at every single position. So Arizona and Illinois are in. That side of the Final Four is set for Saturday, and we are just waiting for the other 2 games to take place. So, Tennessee versus Michigan. That is going to be a crazy good game, I would think. Now, around here, we don't like predictions, but we do love our dark horse, which means a team that you expect nothing from, and all of a sudden they've done something pretty amazing. So Tennessee is our dark horse in this tournament. So they are a seed team that nobody expected to be here. But Rick Barnes, who's been to 3 straight Elite Eights, has this team playing incredible basketball. Again, Tennessee is a big team. They're physical. They were able to dominate Iowa State, out-rebounding the Cyclones, shutting down their sharpshooter. Okay, his last name, forgive me if I butcher it, Milan Momcilovic. Hopefully I got that right. Tennessee star guard Jacoby Gillespie, or Gillespie, however he chooses to say that, and forward Nate Ament. But it's their bigs, Jalen Carey and Felix Okpara, who have been a big difference. Carey and Okpara combined for 20 paint points. That's a 7-1 edge on the offensive rebounds against Iowa State. Okpara also had 3 blocks, so that's a huge swing in momentum. Tennessee's looking for their first ever Final Four appearance. This program so far has never gotten that far, and wouldn't it be great to see the dark horse make it either to the Final Four or the Final 2? But that's a huge deal in Tennessee's history. And Rick Barnes is one of the best coaches right now in college basketball. Again, he's been to the Elite Eight 6 times, but he's never made a Final Four. So that would be a monkey off his back. Now, Michigan is a bit of a juggernaut, as we were talking about, and they've been dominant all season long. They are also big. They are also strong. They rolled over 16 Howard, 101-80. That's 21 points difference. In the first round, they beat number 9 St. Louis, 95-72 in the second round. And they crushed Alabama, 90-77, to get where they are. Michigan's playing the best basketball right up there with Arizona in the tournament. They're long, athletic, and they have NBA-level talent pretty much across the board. Michigan's trying to win their second national championship. first since 1989. That was a group of guys who have gone to the NBA and since retired. In the Fab Five, you got Chris Webber, Jalen Rose. Trying to remember who else was on that team. Juwan Howard, I think, if I'm not wrong. So those are some pretty big names. So, and then you have Glenn Rice. Now, 37 years later, they're 2 wins away from another title. Now, that Fab Five team, there were some issues surrounding it, so don't quote that when you talk to your friends. I mean, they did win, but some issues after the fact have changed that outcome a little bit. So there is a terrible matchup. So this is a terrible matchup for Tennessee. Michigan is bigger. Some would consider them more talented and more experienced. And Tennessee's only, their big thing they need to do, a key on defense and on offense, is to slow the game down, out-rebound Michigan, and really work hard to keep Michigan cold from the three-point line. That perimeter defense has to be rock solid for Tennessee to even really have a chance here. Michigan is the 9.5-point favorite for a reason. Sadly, as talent and everything goes, they are just a better team as it stands today. So, Duke UConn, now for the game of the tournament. This match is the matchup everyone wanted. Duke, the number 1 overall seed, and Cameron Boozer, as we mentioned. UConn, the defending champions, and they are trying to repeat. So, yeah, Duke is led by Cameron Boozer, again, son of former NBA player Carlos Boozer. And so we'll see how this turns out. Duke also has a strong supporting cast, including Con Neppel and center Cayman Malak. So this is a pretty loaded roster. Duke survived a heated battle with St. John's, and now they are in for another one. The game ended with some chippy play, but Duke advanced. UConn's trying to win back-to-back national championships, so this is huge for them. They won it all last year behind Liam McNeely. He's now in the NBA this year, and this year's team is led by sophomore Alex Caraban and freshman guard Liam O'Brien. UConn doesn't have the superstars the way Duke does, but again, like that Tennessee team or the Arizona team, they have a lot of balance and they have experience. UConn survived a massive scare against Michigan State, and MSU cut a 19-point deficit down, so hopefully that was the wake-up call that UConn needed. Head coach Dan Hurley is trying to cement his legacy as one of the great coaches of this era and win back-to-back titles, and that will put him in some rarefied air. This will be Duke's toughest matchup. UConn has the experience, the coaching, and the defensive intensity to slow down Cameron Boozer. Duke has the talent. If Boozer plays like what we suspect he'll be, which is the National Player of the Year, then Duke's likely going to come out on top here. We don't know that. Obviously, games still have to be played, but Duke's a 3.5-point favorite. And so that's basically a coin flip, which, a lot of these games at this point in the tournament are a coin flip. Any given Sunday would prove that out to be true. So, our dark horse team, as we mentioned, and we love those around here, is Tennessee. They were not supposed to be here. They were a 6th seed in a loaded region. They had to play 11 Miami in the first round, then number 2 Iowa State in the Sweet 16. But this team is buying into what Rick Barnes is selling, and they're playing the best basketball of the season at exactly the moment they need to be. So why is Tennessee dangerous? Well, experience is one. Barnes again, third straight Elite Eight, and he knows how to coach in March. They have size. Tennessee is one of the biggest teams in the country, and they are able to shut down the paint and be dominant at both ends. They have defense. They held Iowa State, that's a number 2, to 62 points, and forced them into a lot of bad shots for most of that game. They have the motivation, as Tennessee has never reached the Final Four. So this program, these players, this coach, they are hungry to prove that they belong on that elite stage. Now, along with all the positives, there are some things, some keys to the game that Tennessee needs to be aware of, and I'm sure they're coaching to this, but their schedule for the Final Four is pretty brutal. They have to beat number 1 Michigan, and if they win that, they'd face either Duke or UConn in the Final Four. That's a pretty tall order. That's 3 of the best teams in the entire country. But hey, that's March Madness, and they call it madness because anything can happen. Upsets have already happened, especially with this Tennessee team. And if Tennessee can beat Michigan today, they're going to be the most beloved team for the moment in America. So let's look ahead to the Final Four. We already know 2 of the teams, Illinois and Arizona. But we're looking ahead and saying potentially Michigan and Duke will be on the other side. We'll see if our dark horse can pull off one more upset. The Final Four matchups are on Saturday, Game 1 at 6 p.m. That will be, if it all works out, Illinois versus Arizona. Game 2 would be Michigan versus Duke, but we don't know that for sure just yet. But that's what we're thinking may happen. So, that's it for today. We've got you all set for the Elite 8 games. The Final Four we're talking about for Saturday, April 4th in Indianapolis. And then the championship, the Final 2, is on Monday, April 6th. So this has been an incredible tournament up to this point. We're really just getting started. So don't forget to tune in, either CBS or up here in Canada, I believe it's on TSN. But don't miss any of the games, because it's some real good basketball taking place here. So, thanks for tuning in to True North Sports Talk podcast. Use the hashtag of True North Sports Talk and let us know who you think the Final Four is going to be and how you think the championship game's going to go. So, until next time, keep on cheering for your teams. Let us know what you'd like to see on further podcasts, and we will see you next time.